Well, these didn't last very long, did they? I usually make big entrances and stuff and videos and everything like that, but I just kind of want to talk about, for me, in my mind, the complete and utter failure that is the new UFC Fight Glove. Now, to give you an idea, guys, why I'm making this video, and if you're new to the channel, my name's Al Morrow, and I am a pro mixed martial artist, and I've been collecting boxing and MMA equipment since I was 15 years old. I'm 27 now, so that's what, 12 years? I don't know. I'm not good at math. That's why I fight. But basically, a lot of the big things over the years that I've heard is basically that the UFC Fight Gloves sucked, and I do have the UFC Fight Gloves, the new ones. I unboxed these about 3 weeks ago, and before I go into even talking about them, I think they kind of suck, like a lot of other people did. But I'm making this video because so many people over the last week have been talking about the fights that are going on tonight. UFC 309, headlined by Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic. Co-main event I am so excited for because I'm a massive Michael Chandler fan, and he's fighting Charles Oliveira, so that's going to be a great rematch. But one of the bigger headlines throughout this week hasn't been the fights. It's been more or less the UFC Fight Gloves and how apparently we are not going to be using the new ones that were only released for fights and to the public around June of this last year in 2024 when Islam Makhachev and Dustin Poirier fought on UFC 302. Again, that was in June, and we're in the middle of November now, and these gloves are already apparently not only being discontinued for this fight, they're being discontinued for the rest of the fights. Now, and apparently we're just going to go back to these ones. These are the old ones, the Century version, which has been used, I want to say, since 2007 or 8, and then Century stopped partnering with the UFC, I think around 2015 or 16, and Diaco is the manufacturer of the gloves, but they still use the Century design. And in fact, Diaco is actually the manufacturer of the Vices design gloves, and we'll talk about Vices and everything like that in a minute. But basically, there was a lot of speculation as to why we aren't going to be using the new UFC Fight Gloves and go with the old ones, even though there were so many complaints about the old ones and why these gloves were designed. The big speculations, the biggest one that I saw was because of Jon Jones. He basically did a couple different interviews and a couple different things saying that, oh, hey, I don't like these gloves. They're uncomfortable. They're too tight on my hands. I don't like that they curve my hands, which for me, the curving your hands part, look at the glove. It doesn't do that. But we're going to talk about that in a minute anyway. And, I didn't like them. And most people speculated, like Ariel Helwani made a whole video on his YouTube channel. I suggest you go watch it because I always like watching his stuff. But basically he said, well, are we really surprised that they changed the glove for Jon Jones when they uplifted a whole event from one state? I want to say from from Vegas to California, I want to say is how that worked. And it could have been the other way around. But basically that's what wound up happening, right? So if they were willing to uplift the whole event and move it, why wouldn't they do that for the gloves just for Jon Jones? And at first I'm thinking no, because then the whole card would have a complete and utter uproar. But again, same thing happened when they moved the events. And then he actually did an interview and he said, no, it wasn't my request that got this. He was told that it's a veterans card of the UFC and that's why they're going to use the old gloves, why we're going to put you in new stuff. And that turns out that's not the case. Dana White at the pre-fight press conference for UFC 309 basically said that there were so many different complaints that people said they don't fit, they're uncomfortable, they're all these other things, that he finally said, you know what, we've had too many complaints about them, we gave it a shot. Basically, we're a loaded enough company to where we can afford a mistake like this, and we're just going to go back to the old gloves. Because at the end of the day, his theory on an interview I watched with Kevin Iole just earlier, basically he said, I guess as long as you have fingerless MMA gloves, you are never going to prevent eye pokes. And for me, truer words have never been spoken. Now, I want to talk about these gloves because I unboxed them a few weeks ago and I already broke them in quite a bit. And basically, if you want my upfront opinion before I break down everything for you, all I'll say is these gloves are equally as bad as these ones. I don't think these gloves really fixed a whole lot of problems that they did. At the end of the day, these gloves weren't designed for anything else but to stop eye pokes, and I think this glove utterly failed, and that's why I'm calling this a failure, and that's why the headline is the failure. Basically, guys, when we talk about these gloves, they were designed by Vices, which is a very reputable company in football equipment. They create damage mitigating football equipment as well as baseball, and I believe hockey is what I read, and that they're more into football than anything else. And my first question when I saw this, and they were first revealed to the public as far as like hey, we're going to be using new gloves at UFC 300 during the pre-fight press week and stuff like that, and all they said was Vices, again a football company, was designing the new glove. Now here's the thing, I have no doubts that Vices knows everything about damage mitigation, and they know the proper foams, and they know the proper equipment and technology that needs to go into making sure that damage is mitigated. But all we ever heard was damage mitigated and, just freedom of motion and stuff like that. But very rarely did you hear any of the people from Vices say to stop eye pokes, right? All they said was the gloves should be able to open and close easier so you don't get poked in the eye as much, which it's fine. At the end of the day, my first thing was, as a guy that collects gloves and stuff like that, why wouldn't you go to a brand, and there's a lot of them out there, that could actually design a glove or that has designed a glove, right? And I know there was a whole thing with Trevor Whitman and that they wanted to go with his Onyx Sports MMA gloves, but he's not willing to give up his patent to Diaco so they can mass produce it. Fair enough. He doesn't even sell it to the general public. I think you have to be basically in the UFC and tight with Trevor for him to do that. I still think to this day he makes all of the gloves that you try by Onyx by himself. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's how it goes. It makes great equipment, but at the end of the day, that's what's stopping that. And then a lot of other people have theories on especially the Pride gloves being the end-all be-all, which I'll talk about that in a bit too. But when it comes to this glove, let's talk about a couple things. The construction of it. It is basically a genuine leather glove, and at the end of the day, the leather is very cheap compared to the original, I'd even say, because 3 weeks in, the leather's already cracked on most of the places. Islam Makhachev himself said they feel old after a couple weeks of use. And honestly, these gloves started to crack. The leather did before I even took them out of their display box that they came in. So at the end of the day, the leather feels really cheap and it doesn't feel that much better than the original. The stitching on the glove itself, their whole thing was we don't want stitching on the punch surface at all so we can stop lacerations. For one, I don't think it was the stitching that ever caused the lacerations. I think it's the fact that leather and a very small surface area hitting you across the head is going to do that, right? The lacerations that they're talking about probably alludes to the Owano gloves that they used way back when Randy Couture got a cut from the tip of the glove. And guess what? Any type of leather surface can cut you if you do that. That's why we wear the Vaseline, so the gloves usually bounce off a little bit more and it prevents cuts from happening. Sometimes your face will get dry out a little bit and your gloves will also dry out a little bit. It happens. Trust me, I fought a bunch of times. It still happens. I fought in boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai, MMA. The gloves do get drier. It just depends on what you're doing. Sometimes they get wet if you're grappling and stuff like that, but if you're constantly punching a face, even a tiny little bit of Vaseline that they allow isn't going to stop cuts. It's just never going to happen, all right? That's fighting. It's going to happen. The other thing too, I'd say, is that the stitching across where it is, let's talk about where the cut happened with Randy Couture was this part and this part. And look, there's stitching fraying out here. There's stitching fraying out down here. There's stitching all around the bottom fraying out. And it's on both gloves too. It's not just one or the other. So you have that issue too. So the quality is not really there. Then on top of it, the big one that they wanted to stop was eye pokes. Now, please tell me how this glove was ever designed to stop eye pokes compared to the Century version. They look identical as far as how flat they are. In fact, in my opinion, the Century version looks like it's curved a little bit more than this. And the other thing too is the padding is a lot thinner. So people were saying knockouts were happening more because of the glove. Could have been, I doubt it, but that's basically the idea. When we put the glove on though, okay, it opens up pretty easily. The interior lining is comfortable, but when we put the glove through the fingers, it's kind of hard to see it. But if you see these seams here that are going throughout here, right? Those are actually leading up into the fingers. When I tell you that the seams are literally rubbing up against my skin so uncomfortably, right? At the end of the day, it's just not comfortable at all. It just feels like I'm getting scraped across my fingers, and it literally leaves blisters around the tips of my fingers. When I've used these to break them in, that's basically how it's felt. Now, the other thing too, again, when we talk about the eye poking situation, what Vices did was put something called a slip foam track in. Basically, the foam splits in different places and you're able to kind of open and close your hand a little bit more, get better grips. And I will say you are able to open and close the hand just a little bit better. Not much better, but a little bit better. There's not as much padding, and it actually does like pad yourself when you hit bags and mitts a little bit. But I tell you what, I wouldn't want to get hit by it any more than I would the other one. But at the end of the day, all it does is really just open and close the glove more. But again, when we look at the padding compared to the old ones and the new ones, they're about equal. If not, the new ones are a little bit less. Apparently the foam in this is a lot more padded. It feels more like a memory foam or like an open cell foam, basically meaning that it's able to breathe a bit more, which is the UFC fight gloves use basically an very hard open cell foam, a low density open cell foam, and sometimes gel padding on the inside of these gloves, which is crazy for fight gloves. Most fight gloves in boxing will use either horsehair or they're using open cell foam. You use closed cell foam, which is basically like wrestling mats, yoga mats for bag mitts, because they will last longer because bags are inanimate objects. But at the end of the day, these gloves padding doesn't feel that much better. They do have a wrist bar in the back compared to the last one, but I tell you, it barely sticks to the back of your wrist, and the wrist strap does not strap tight at all. You have to really yank it, but it has such a short motion that you're there. So you're basically limited to the sizes you can get. So if you want the right wrist strap size, you got to get a size lower or a size higher. In this case, 2XL fits my hand pretty good. It's actually a little bit tight on the back of my hands. And when I've wrapped my hands using these, it feels like there's not enough room for that, which John Jones even talked about, that he's worried that his coaches are going to have a hard time wrapping his hands. So at the end of the day, I don't know how this glove was supposed to stop eye pokes either, because again, it's such a flat glove. Sure, I'm able to close my fists more, but guess what? If I'm a wrestler, my hands are going to be open a lot more anyway. And even still, it's supposed to pre-curve my knuckles into this. It doesn't at all. It's not in a natural fist position whatsoever. If I wanted to poke you, it would be as easy as this. Bink, right? If I can close my fingers that easy, why wouldn't I be able to open it that easy to poke you? At the end of the day, it's a technique issue that people are using. Like, if some people fight like this with their hands open, that's fine. But you got John Jones who's literally measuring out like this a lot because he wants to try and grab, or DC used to do that a lot. Stipe's done it. I can name 1,000 other people that have poked people in the eye that way. It's just how it works. Not every MMA fighter comes out like this closed all the time, because you have to anticipate you got to grab or do whatever it is, right? So the other thing that drove me nuts about this glove is I just thought maybe because Vices made it, you know, and because there were some more expensive things into it, that's why it costs a lot more. But you can get a UFC, the old version of the UFC fight gloves, for about $100 flat. These were $220, right? And there are a couple different models that you got. You got the gunmetal gray one, the 3.8, which is this. You have a tough model. You have a Dana White's Contender Series model, which is blue. The gold gloves, which is the 5.8 with the octagon patterns in it. That's for the championship fights, which people thought were kind of gimmicky and stuff like that. They had the Road to the UFC ones, which are red. There's a lot of different ones out there, but at the end of the day, most people just kind of thought, you know, they look exactly the same and they were going to fizzle out. And so far they have. Now, comparing these to these, all I can say is, again, there's not really much difference other than this is a 2X glove. And all I can say is it's pretty tight in the finger area. I think the leather is much better quality than the other ones. I think the one thing that sucks on some of the older UFC gloves is the logos will fall off. And at the end of the day, you tell me if there's much of a difference of me opening and closing my hands here. No, there really isn't. The only thing I'll say is when I keep my fingers closed like this, it feels like the foam wants to snap me back like that. That's what people talk about when it comes to eye pokes, right? It's because the glove doesn't promote you to close your hands quite as much. Now, at the end of the day, folks, I do agree that these gloves close your hand a little bit easier than these do. But here's the other thing. If I wanted to close my hand, fine. If I wanted to poke you, it's that easy. And that's really it. The padding in this glove doesn't feel too much different from this, other than it's a little stiffer. But at the end of the day, the glove here is actually more comfortable on my hands. I'm able to move my fingers a lot easier than these. There's no uncomfortable stitching in between the fingers. And be honest with me, do you see that much unnecessary stitching on this glove compared to this glove? No, not really. There's stitching in between the palm here that you can see. There's stitching in between the palm and the back of the wrist here. And you can see there's no stitching really outside here. There's a little bit there, but there's not really much difference as far as the stitching they're talking about that's causing lacerations and stuff like that. So at the end of the day, there's really not much to talk about. And also, look at the wrist support you got. Not only does the glove open up a lot easier here, but you also have a pretty thick wrist strap. And honestly, that's the one thing I said about these gloves when I reviewed them, is that the wrist support wasn't too bad. I wish they had a bar on the back, but at the end of the day, most fight gloves don't, because you're going to wrap your hands up good and you're going to strap it up and tape it anyway. So this glove compared to the new glove, really, there's no difference other than you have more expensive materials into it. Now, again, the other thing too is that these gloves are a lot lighter. And this is the one myth I love to debunk the most, and people give me all the hate in the world for it. So I have a small scale here, right? We'll put that there. And everyone says, man, when we get the 4-ounce gloves on, it's a different world. Well, these gloves aren't 4 ounces. They are, let's see, that is 5.1. So that's a little bit more. Then people say, well, it's 4 ounces of padding. No, it's not. It's just not. I'm sorry to tell you, but if you take this whole glove in its entirety, between the leather, the stitching, the different additions to it, the interior lining, and then the padding itself, I'd be shocked if the padding was about 2.5 ounces. Okay, maybe 3, I'd say, which is not much of a difference for most. But again, we put it back on just to make sure we have it right. So that, well, now my scale is acting all sorts of wacky. So let's try that again. So, okay, 6.2 actually. So that's 6.2 ounces. Let's do that again. 6.2. Then we take the new glove, which weighs 3.9. The glove itself is 4 ounces. So if you want to tell me the padding itself is 4 ounces, again, you'd be wrong, because you have a padding strip here, a padding strip here. You have the interior lining, the leather, which leather is a heavy material, right? And then we go into other gloves. Let's go ahead and pick the one glove everyone thinks is going to save the world, and that is a Pride design. Now, these are not regular Pride gloves. These are an exact replica by a Korean company, but at the end of the day, they are virtually designed the same. They have the same exact materials. They ran the same price, and they look and feel exactly the same. As I have tried Pride gloves on, they look and feel the same. I've been using these for a long time. Whereas we weigh those 6.2, so they weigh as much as the regular UFC gloves made by Century. Now, when we put these gloves on, I took the laces out because I don't like them. But at the end of the day, when we put these gloves on, right, and these are replicas of Pride gloves, for one, you can see that, yes, we have a lot more padding in these gloves. That's what was traditional of Pride gloves. The other thing you can see that mess up a lot, no one ever talks about. Notice how I can poke you here, right? It curves my hand a little bit. It's really easy to close my fist, but guess what? It's still open very easily, and I could poke you. You know what Pride gloves had that really sucked? The individual fingerlets. People thought, oh, that'd be great for individualism, but watch, I do this, say I'm grappling one way, oh, my finger's out. Who remembers watching Pride fights and saying, oh, you know what, my bad, I gotta put my finger back in and stop the fight that way? That happened all the time with Pride gloves. Even with a replica version, the same thing happened. Now, a lot of other people will say, you know, gloves by Ryzen, right? And I've done a video comparing every single one of the major promotions MMA fight gloves, right? But we talk about the Ryzen gloves, which for me are my favorite out there right now. But these weigh, let's see, 3.5 ounces, so they're not even 4 ounces either. But you can see they got the overly pronounced cupping fist, but they also have a uniform finger outlet, right? So when we go ahead and open this, they also have an elastic strap. Hang on. They have an elastic strap here, and instead of having a thumb guard, it's just a tiny neoprene sleeve. This is not even a leather glove. This is actually a synthetic leather glove. We put that in, and bam, that's comfortable, fits my hand. But also, we take this glove compared to the size of the regular UFC glove that's going to be used tonight. This is smaller, maybe about the same width, I'd say, maybe a little bit smaller overall. And then we take the new UFC fight glove, which is actually, I believe, we said it was lighter, 3.9, so they weigh exactly the same from the Ryzen, and we got that there, right? But at the end of the day, look, close my fist easy, overly cupped. The foam is a lot softer on the inside of this glove, but guess what? Again, is it going to stop eye pokes? Bink. No, it's not going to stop eye pokes. Naturally, yes, my finger is like this. It does curve your hand in a good way, and it's very easy to move my fingers open and close and everything like that. And it's a lot more comfortable than the new UFC fight gloves and the old UFC fight gloves and even the Pride replica. But at the end of the day, guys, I can still poke you just as easy. Now, here's the kicker to it, right? Those are just a couple options. We can talk about a bunch of different gloves between, let's see, even the original UFC maker that made WEC King of the Cage, Owano, right? These are basically the same thing as the Century gloves, only they're here. Again, a little bit curved here, but if I put my hand on the inside, which I think you guys will get the picture, these don't open, they don't have elastic there. But at the end of the day, when we're here, let's see here. I won't even strap it, but look, again, closing my fist, keeps it closed, so that actually works better than the Century version, but all I do, bink, poke. It's not hard to do. It's just not hard to do. You can poke eyes in any MMA glove you use. And these RDX gloves, let's see, Shuto by Isami. Again, this is basically the same exact glove as these, also made by Isami, the Ryzen gloves, right? You put these on, right? They don't have an elastic strap, but all you gotta do, you put these on, you strap them. Again, really easy to move my fingers, poke. That easy. If I'm doing this and measuring with my fingers, I'm gonna poke you. So there's that. I go on and on about this stuff because people think those Pride gloves are the answer to every problem. And I guarantee you I'm gonna get one stupid comment that says, well, you don't have the actual Pride gloves. I have the Ryzen ones, which are replicas of the Pride ones, basically, made by Isami. And Pride was made by Winning, which is different. But at the end of the day, that's besides the point. We can even use the PFL gloves. Okay, let's go into the big clunky PFL gloves made by Century, the same people that used to make the gloves for the UFC. We go ahead, strap that up. Okay, so let's see, we close our finger. We have the same problem as the Sentry glove here by the UFC in that it doesn't close and it's easy to open. But guess what? Again, poke, you just got poked again. Even with a big bulky glove like this. Even if we go back to the Fuji version of the PFL gloves. Let me see if I have those by me. I do. And I really like these ones. But the Fuji version of the PFL gloves, right? And they open just like the UFC gloves. They're designed very similar to the original UFC gloves by Sentry. But again, these have a nice curve to it. These open and close very easily. Guess what? Poke. That easy. It's not hard to do. And that's why I'm sick of people saying we need Pry gloves, we need different gloves out there. There is a solution for this glove issue, and to be frank with you all, there's not. And you want even more proof? Let's take an MMA sparring glove by Venom, okay? Venom, the official outfitter of the UFC. So many of your favorite fighters use the Venom Challenger 3.0s that I have in my hand. And then let's go ahead and see if we can stop pokes. And look how much padding we have here. Big rounded padding, right? Guess what? Poke. Fingerless gloves can never and will never not be able to poke you. And that's my thing behind when it comes to the new UFC fight gloves. When Dana White says, and I agree with him, and I'm not a Dana White rider or anything like that. I'm just saying that when he says the simple fact of when you have fingerless gloves, you cannot stop eye pokes. And that's why I think these gloves were an utter fail. Not only do they not protect your knuckles that much more, they are a little bit easier to close your fist, that's fine. But guess what? In my opinion, these gloves, since they're easier to close, they're easier to open and poke you. So if you're saying John Jones wants to go back to the old gloves because he can poke more, it's a stupid argument. It just is. You can poke eyes with any glove I just showed you, right? Any single one. You can poke someone's eye with a thumb boxing glove, even though it has a thumb attachment. I mean, if we take just a random pair here, right? Even though this has a thumb attachment, somehow you'll find someone that can stick that thumb out and poke you in the eye. It's just how it works, right? The only way that you can stop damaging with eye pokes, you can't even stop eye pokes, is if you put some type of neoprene sleeve over your fingers. But guess what? No one's going to do that because then that messes up the grappling. So at the end of the day, folks, I wanted to make this video kind of just talk about the fact that these gloves for me are just way too overpriced for one. 220 bucks. Just the feel of them is not that great. I wouldn't recommend it if you see them on there unless you want them for collector's purpose, because they did come in a pretty cool box. But at the end of the day, we're going to see the old UFC fight gloves being used. And if it were up to me, if I could go back time, if I worked for the UFC, I just wouldn't even mess with anything. Or if I did, I would have looked more towards the Ryzen route and stuff like that, because I think those gloves are just overall better as far as protecting your hands and your wrist and overall just motions with your fingers. But it's up to the user of the glove. There is no stopping eye pokes. So again, my humble opinion, you can't stop it. So long as there's fingerless gloves, you will never see the end of eye pokes. Just wanted to make that video before the fights came out, guys, and talk about that. Again, we won't be seeing these gloves used ever again. We're only going to be seeing the old school Sentry version of the UFC fight gloves. So with that said, comment below if you think that these gloves were a complete fail. Let me know if you disagree with me on anything here. I'm telling you, if you ever want to come by the house and then see all my gloves and try every single one of my open fingerless MMA gloves out there, you are more than welcome to try it. But at the end of the day, there is no solution that is permanent. There are things that will help it, but there is no solution to eye pokes other than people got to stop poking people in the eyes. That's my honest opinion, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Like I said, comment below, let me know what you think. Subscribe, share this with your friends if they had anything to say about the gloves. And enjoy the fights tonight. I know I'm going to. Have a great day, everybody.